Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's take a look at the top stories for the hour. All 20 bodies have been recovered on the site of the Turkish cargo airplane crash in Georgia. Police and humanitarian aid teams are evacuating civilians from Zaporizhzhia Oblast of Ukraine as the fights intensify. Venezuela mobilizes its military in response to a US naval buildup in the Caribbean. Now we're coming to you from the closest accessible point near the crash site in the Georgia Sinagi municipality, where recovery efforts continue after the deadly crash of a Turkish military transport plane. A news crew on the ground obtained exclusive information that all 20 bodies have been recovered on the site today. Anini Nikolashvili has the latest updates.
The Turkish Ministry of National Defense has confirmed that 20 personnel were killed in the crash of a C-130 military transport plane in Georgia on November 11. The aircraft went down near the Georgia-Azerbaijan border, and joint search and recovery efforts are underway with Georgian authorities. Defense Minister Yasir Guler expressed condolences to the victims' families and the Turkish nation, calling the fallen soldiers heroic comrades in arms. We are reporting from the closest point accessible to the media in Georgia's Sinagi municipality. Police now have expanded the restricted perimeter, and access to the site is completely blocked due to the ongoing recovery and investigation process. The Special Tasks Department is mobilized on location, and foreign and Georgian forensic teams are working jointly. Bodies are being retrieved from the crash site, and several remains have already been found near the front section of the aircraft. Because of the sensitivity of this process, media movement has been stopped entirely beyond this point.
First of all, I would like to express my deep condolences to the families of the victims and to the people of Turkey. As you know, yesterday at around 2 o'clock, a Turkish military aircraft took off from the territory of Azerbaijan, crossed the Georgian border, and crashed approximately 5 kilometers beyond it. There were 20 people on board, including the crew members. I am in constant contact and coordination with the Minister of Internal Affairs of Turkey. An international investigative team has been established to look into the incident, with the participation of our Turkish colleagues.
In its statement, U.S. manufacturer Lockheed Martin, which produces the C-130 Hercules, also expressed condolences to Turkey's Air Force and citizens, saying the company is ready to support investigators in any way necessary. The C-130 is one of the most widely used tactical airlifters in the world, designed to transport cargo, troops, and equipment capable of landing even on unprepared runways. At this stage, the cause of the crash is still unknown. Right now, investigators are focused on two possible causes: a technical malfunction or structural failure, or human error, including unsecured cargo on board. However, experts say it is still too early for conclusions. We will continue to stay on site and monitor development as rescue and investigation operations progress. Nini Nikolaishvili, Sinagi, A News.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan today has confirmed that the black box from the downed C-130 has been located. He also praised Georgia and Azerbaijan for their close coordination as the investigation continues.
Last night, we ensured the arrival of our 46-person accident investigation team in the area. Our plane's black box has been found and investigations have begun. We have recovered the remains of 19 people. Our search for final remains continues.
Son naaşımızı arama çalışmalarımız sürüyor. bu elim olayı tüm yönleriyle
We're investigating this tragic incident from all perspectives. Georgian authorities are providing the utmost facilitation and cooperation during this process. Our Azerbaijani brothers are likewise providing all necessary support and contributions.
her türlü katkıyı veriyor.
Turkey is in national grief after the Turkish military cargo plane crash in Georgia killed 20 troops. Authorities are still investigating to determine the cause of the crash. Our correspondent Aliye Iman has more from Istanbul.
Turkey mourns for 20 military personnel who lost their lives in a military plane crash in Georgia. The Lockheed C-130 cargo plane operated by the Turkish Armed Forces crashed in Georgian territory in the municipality of Singnagi in the Kakheti region near the Azerbaijan border. The aircraft was on a flight from the city of Ganja and was bound for Turkey when contact was lost shortly after entering Georgian airspace. All 20 military personnel on board were killed. Among them was Lieutenant Colonel Gökhan Korkmaz, a military officer from Istanbul's Büyükçekmece district. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has offered his condolences, calling them our martyrs who carried the Turkish flag with honor. He declared that the nation stands united in grief and pledged full support to their families. Ceremonies honoring the personnel will take place throughout the country and in their hometowns once their remains are brought back to Turkey. Teams continue to investigate the crash site. While early indications suggest possible mechanical failure or human error, officials emphasize that the primary cause remains under investigation. World leaders, including Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev, NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte, and Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze, have extended condolences, reaffirming solidarity with Turkey. This is Aliye Iman, Istanbul, Turkey, A-News.
Russia claims its troops have pushed further into key eastern Ukrainian cities as heavy fighting continues across the Donbass. Ukraine says the situation on several fronts has become increasingly difficult.
Moscow says its forces have advanced deeper into the city of Pokrovsk, known to Russians as Krasnoarmeysk, describing it as a crucial gateway to the rest of the Donetsk region. Russian soldiers have been seen riding into the Ukrainian city on motorbikes and battered vehicles, moving through fog and debris-strewn roads. Ukraine's military reports around 300 Russian soldiers are already inside Pokrovsk, with fierce street battles underway. Experts say that capturing Pokrovsk would give Russia a stronger position to push north towards Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, two of Ukraine's last major strongholds in Donetsk. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called the situation difficult, while his top commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, says conditions in southeast parts of Zaporizhzhia have also significantly worsened. Moscow, meanwhile, claims to control more than 19% of Ukraine's territory, its largest hold since the war began nearly 3 years ago. Neither side's battlefield claims can be independently verified. But with Russia intensifying attacks in both Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia, the fighting shows no sign of easing.
In southern Ukraine, civilians are once again fleeing as fighting intensifies in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Police and volunteers are racing to evacuate the elderly from the front line amid drone and artillery strikes.
Police and humanitarian teams have evacuated 22 residents from Huliepol and nearby villages in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region, where Russian forces are pushing deeper into the area amid worsening weather conditions. Ukraine's top commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, said troops are locked in exhausting battles near the villages northeast of Huliepol. The town, once home to nearly 15,000 people, now shelters fewer than 500, mostly elderly residents.
It's scary, we're being bombed. Today in the morning I went outside and heard a drone fly by. I stood there and heard how it boomed and banged.
Volunteers and local police say many who stayed behind for years are only now choosing to leave, as strikes grow more frequent and supplies dwindle.
We spent some time in the village and decided to leave. We lost our health. Mother is 88 years old. She's lost her health too. There's nowhere to buy medicine. There's no water. We cannot live like that any longer.
The evacuations are dangerous. Teams from the NGO patrol chaplains say they face constant aerial threats on the road out.
FPVS and glide bombs too, but to a lesser extent in Huliepol. But FPVS on optic fiber cables, you can't do anything against them. So, yeah, FPVS.
Regional officials say Russian troops have advanced near several settlements, including Ushpanivka and Novomykolaivka, forcing Ukrainian units to pull back to safer positions. Drone strikes continue to hit Huliepol. On Tuesday, one person was injured in the latest attack. Local authorities are urging the remaining residents to evacuate while it's still possible.
Ukraine's government has suspended Justice Minister German Galuchenko. However, authorities didn't specify whether this was in relation to an energy corruption case investigated by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Galuchenko, who previously served as energy minister, says he will defend himself in court. The move comes after Ukrainian authorities say they've charged 7 individuals in relation to an alleged $100 million kickback scheme involving senior energy officials. Accusations of kickbacks within this sector are particularly sensitive with the broader public as Ukrainians continue to face widespread power cuts. Venezuela strengthens its national defense amid rising tensions with the United States. President Nicolas Maduro has signed a new law creating integral defense commands to unify civilian and military forces across the country. This move comes alongside nationwide military exercises, signaling Venezuela's readiness to defend its sovereignty.
Queremos paz, tendremos.
Venezuela is immediately activating its so-called integral defense commands designed to unify civilian and military forces across the country. It's after President Nicolas Maduro signed a new national defense law on Tuesday. Maduro said the law establishes a network of state and military bodies to respond to threats.
Todos los comandos de defensa integral.
By signing, the order must be activated for the integral defense commands to be established, structured, and put to work to be prepared. If we, as a republic, as a people, must go to armed struggle to defend this sacred heritage of the liberators, we must be ready to win, to triumph through the path of patriotism and courage. So I proceed to sign and execute the law for the creation of National Integral Defense Commands, signed, approved and ratified today, Tuesday, November 11th, 2025.
De los comandos de defensa integral a nivel nacional. Firmada, aprobada.
The law, approved by Venezuela's National Assembly in an historic vote, received support from both the President and Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez. Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez said it would reshape the country's military doctrine.
The honourable deputies who are in favour of approving the second discussion of the bill for the Integral Defence Command of the nation, in accordance with the provisions of Article 106 of the Internal Rules and Debate, please manifest it with the customary signal. Consequently, it is approved with a qualified majority.
On the same day, Venezuela's Bolivarian armed forces launched a nationwide military exercise. Plan Independencia 200, testing the real-time deployment of weapons and forces. The moves come amid ongoing tensions with the United States, which has carried out multiple strikes on vessels near the Venezuelan coast and in the Eastern Pacific since September, killing dozens of people. The US claims the boats were transporting drugs, though critics have demanded evidence. Maduro has accused Donald Trump of seeking to topple his government, a claim the US president has downplayed.
Mali's Prime Minister, General Abdoulaye Maïga, has accused France and Algeria of backing terrorist groups in the region. He made the statement at the opening of the Bamako military exhibition on Tuesday, where drones, rockets and firearms were showcased. The event gathered senior defence officials from Russia, Nigeria and Burkina Faso. Maïga paid tribute to Mariam Cissé, who he said was killed by terrorists for supporting Mali's army. He dismissed claims that Mali was on the verge of collapse, saying the nation remained strong and united. Over in Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed Spain's King Felipe VI at the Great Hall of the People, where they signed a raft of new cooperation agreements. They both chaired a signing ceremony of deals, which include a joint declaration of intent to strengthen Chinese and Spanish language teaching and cultural exchange, economic cooperation and the export of aquatic products to China. The King will later meet Premier Li Qiang and top legislator Zhao Leji. Then on Thursday, he'll attend a meeting with Spanish and Chinese business leaders and visit Spanish car part maker Gestamp's factory outside Beijing. Tensions rose at the United Nations Major Environmental Summit in Brazil as indigenous groups confronted security over access to the venue. Demonstrators at COP30 expressed frustration over threats to their territories and called for stronger inclusion in international climate decisions. Authorities managed to contain the situation after some injuries were reported.
Tense scenes unfolded at the COP30 Climate Summit in Brazil, where dozens of indigenous protesters forced their way into the conference venue and clashed with security guards. The confrontation happened on Tuesday in the Amazon city of Belém, where world leaders and delegates are meeting for this year's United Nations climate talks. Protesters shouted angrily as they demanded access to the UN compound, accusing authorities of ignoring indigenous rights. The groups say they're angered by ongoing development in the Amazon that threatens their land and way of life.
They are the government, this protest. It's a way of defending the space where it's being held at this moment. But for us, it's a moment of revolt, of indignation. It's a moment when we indigenous people feel the defeat of our territory in our skins. We don't eat money, we want our territory free. But the business of oil exploration, mineral exploration and logging continues.
Security guards pushed protesters back and used tables to block the entrance. One guard rushed away in a wheelchair, clutching his stomach. Another guard, bleeding from a cut above his eye, said he had been struck by a heavy drumstick thrown from the crowd. Authorities confiscated several batons before the protesters dispersed. The group had earlier joined hundreds of demonstrators marching toward the venue to demand stronger climate action and indigenous participation in decision-making.
One of the key figures behind last year's COP29 in Baku, high-level champion Nigar Arpadaraei, says this conference must build on that legacy. Earlier, speaking to A News, she reflected on Baku's breakthroughs in climate finance and private sector engagement and shared what she expects from this next phase of global climate diplomacy.
it started, the conference started, the 30th meeting of the Conference of Parties started. Basically, you've been through that drama of COP29. We remember that NCQG decision adopted last minute. What is your expectation from this COP? Because ultimately, this one is going to build upon the attainment gained in Baku last year.
Thanks a lot. It's great to be here. It's my second COP actually, but I think that COP29 came up with historic decisions on climate finance and on Article 6 and many other decisions we're taking in Baku. And now our main goal is to make sure that all those decisions and promises are being implemented. My role as the high-level champion was mainly to engage with non-state actor community, private sector, civil society, and we managed to bring many corporations and business sector people to Baku, because if we speak about green transition, you cannot imagine green transition without private sector being involved and being incentivized to do that. So, but the main idea behind was also not only to work with large companies, big businesses, but also to engage small and medium enterprises, which we successfully did with our climate proofing SME campaign, which reached to 90 million SMEs within 100 countries. So what is extremely proud moment for me is to see that COP29 has done it, but COP30 has taken this legacy and they have assigned the SME Day as a thematic day. So that's the legacy that will stay from us. What we are working on now with COP30 presidency, myself and Dan Yoshpe working together with UNFCCC and Marrakesh Partnership partners to come up with one unified action agenda. Just to tell our people that will be watching, action agenda is all those initiatives that have been done throughout all COPs will be gathered in one document in 6 axes. So that's the unified action agenda that COP30 presidency will be presenting at this COP. It's a document and it's a 5-year plan for other COPs.
Let's cross live now to our Orkan Amashov in Belém, Brazil, where leaders and delegates from around the world have gathered for COP30. The conference is being called one of the most decisive in years, with climate finance, adaptation and accountability all under intense discussion. Orkan, what's the atmosphere like on the ground there? Do delegates seem optimistic that this summit will finally turn those finance pledges into action?
Thank you very much, Tilak. Currently, I suppose what happened towards the end of day 2, the moment when a number of indigenous people stormed into the COP30 venue, causing a degree of perturbation and mayhem, which was brought to an end very quickly, but still the questions are being asked about the security, and that element dominates the landscape today. So security is one of the key issues. When I entered COP30 venue today, the measures implemented by the security people were much, much tougher. And it is also very clear that there are some question marks about the organization. And when you enter the COP30 venue today, you notice that the volunteers are lined up properly, they're greeting you properly. An impression given is that COP30 actually kicks off today, not that it kicked off on Monday. Mm-hmm. This is one moment. Number 2 moment, of course, as I mentioned during our last conversation, Tilak, agenda was adopted on Monday, but there are some question marks left because there are elements which need to be clarified. And today there will be a press briefing where COP30 presidency will be addressing those matters. They will try to inject that dose of confidence and positivity into the delegates, into their conference and into the moods of delegates to make sure that everybody feels very, very positive. There's also one school of thought. Of course, it's a debatable matter, and I don't want to present it as a crystal clear fact, but many locals that I've spoken to today before coming to COP30 venue, and some of the delegates with whom I conversed, confirmed that there is a political tension, naturally, between the government, President Lula, and also opposition. And opposition is actually trying to use indigenous movement for their own political gain. This is one school of thought, and naturally we need to examine and properly evaluate it. Regarding the COP30 key deliverables, naturally the Amazon forest, the Amazon basin, and the question of deforestation are going to dominate, and all of those issues together could be described as part of the adaptation.
Okay, so Orkan, as you mentioned earlier, we've all seen the images of demonstrations near the venue, including protests led by Indigenous groups from the Amazon. Now, what are they demanding and how are their voices being heard at COP30?
Yesterday, when I joined our distinguished editor-in-chief, Guy Schoen's primetime show, he put me the same question, asking about to what extent they actually feel excluded from the decision-making process happening here in Belém, Brazil. Well, there are different people, of course. There is no uniform position. Some indigenous people that I've spoken to, they did not express any criticism of the government, the present incumbent government here, but there is a large degree of perception, skepticism when it comes to their involvement in the process. So there is one particular moment in line with which those investors who are encouraged to actually funnel money into the needs of Amazon Basin people will in return gain certain exclusive rights, and those exclusive rights will militate against their right to the land. And these people, as indigenous people, feel, number one, they feel excluded from the process. Number two, they feel that they're losing their own land, their own territory, and decisions are being made their fate about the Amazon Basin that they inhabit, where they reside, and effectively they're going to be losing as a result of this long process. They're also very much worried about the ongoing environmental catastrophe, about the fact that their livelihoods are affected, and they effectively feel that some of them, of course, naturally, in particular those people who stormed into the COP30 venue, that they are not being properly heard. And bearing in mind that this is this government's firm intention to present this COP as a people's COP, they will try to change the atmospherics and the public mood when it comes to this particular matter.
Okay, Orkan, before I let you go, any closing remarks about perhaps concrete progress that's been made so far? Are we seeing any movement on the global climate finance roadmap?
Dilek, process is happening, it's underway, but it's not really very intense. As I mentioned to you earlier, when I entered COP30 venue, the impression given was that the COP30 started properly today. And you see it from the installations. And I think this element of lack of preparedness, which seems to be very palpable to many people, can also be sort of translated into the intensity of the decision-making process. What will happen by the end of this COP30? Naturally, the destiny of the least developed countries and other matters will be discussed. Certain initiatives will be made, but climate finance goal still is key. And how much money will be invested into adaptation? Will the 40 billion commitment be officially transformed into practicable action? Everybody, including the governor of California that I had the chance to interview yesterday, were talking about implementation. And the question here is that from pledges, initiatives, and statements, we need to move into implementation. What is the implementation? I imagine very considerable chunk of what could be deemed as implementation. Let us see what will happen. It's very difficult to say anything with any degree of certainty, but regarding Azerbaijan, certain things are happening. Currently, as I talk to you, high-level annual meeting of Baku Hub is underway. I was there literally 1 hour ago and interviewed a couple of the participants, including the Environment, Climate and Natural Resources Minister of Gambia. It looks like there will be progress when it comes to countries like Azerbaijan, their actions, certain limited, definable, tangible things will happen. But if we talk about key deliverable of COP30, it's too early to say anything definite.
Okay, Orkan, thank you so much for joining us and updating us with the latest there.
Thank you, Dilek.
Now we'll take a short break, and when we return we'll talk to our guest about the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine war, where Ukrainian officials have confirmed that around 300 Russian soldiers have entered the strategic eastern city of Pokrovsk. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Ukrainian officials have confirmed that around 300 Russian soldiers have entered the eastern city of Pokrovsk as Kyiv's forces withdraw from positions in 5 locations in the southeast of the country. The city is a strategic center in the Donetsk region, and this development signals a new phase in the war's dynamic. Joining me to discuss further is retired Colonel Andriy Ordinovich from the Armed Forces of Ukraine from Kyiv. Mr. Ordinovich, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, to start, how significant is the entry of roughly 300 Russian soldiers into Pokrovsk, and what does that indicate in military operational terms?
Russian had strategic goals to occupy Pokrovsk in the middle of October. Today we already have the middle of November, and what we see, some couple hundreds of Russian troops in this city. It is true. They are mainly located in the northern and northeast part of the Pokrovsk. Other territory of Pokrovsk is under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. As our commander-in-chief mentioned that for this period of time, almost 2 months intensive fight, Russian already lost their 13,000 casualties. It is wounded in action as well as killed in action. Their objective there mainly related to cut off our logistic of our troops there. It could simplify them further occupation of northern part of Donetsk region, where the Kramatorsk big conglomerates as well as Sloviansk city are located. They are also trying to make some breakthrough in order to make a more difficult life of civil population and terrorize them in the area of northern part of Donetsk. As for now, the beginning of this week, end of last week and beginning of this week, we counted roughly 1,000 Russian troops in the Pokrovsk area. Right now, 300 or 500 troops. Our armed forces are trying to liberate and make a more difficult time to Russians, and as well as undermine their efforts in other area of the front line.
Okay, now given Pokrovsk's, as you mentioned, strategic role as a logistics and rail hub, what would its fall or partial fall mean for the wider front?
Look, it is exactly the reason why they started new operation or intensify new operation in Zaporizhia area. The tactical objective then to take more or expanded breakthrough in order to shift our attention from Pokrovsk to Zaporizhia, which they believe that Ukrainian leadership is going to do some kind of reinforcement of troops in Zaporizhia. It means our reserves could be redirected from Pokrovsk to Zaporizhia. It is like 1,200 kilometers front line are giving them a leverage to do periodically breakthrough. Right now we can see on Zaporizhia, but their primary strategic objectives is retake initiative in southern part of Ukraine, which we renewed in 2023 after the counter-offensive operation. Second, they would like strategically make more secure land bridge or land road from the main Russian land towards the Crimea through the Tokmak, Melitopol and Mariupol area, as well as to gain some political diplomatical leverage to show up to Western that their security assistance is not effective, and probably other ideas staying behind, as well as a political one leverage inside the Russian countries, that Russian citizens would see some kind of progress in the very heavy fight, because the cost of any centimeter of Ukrainian land is very high for Russia. If I will make a comparison in 2022, for each square kilometers, they've been losing one military serviceman. Back in 2023, in Pokrovsk and Avdiivka, in Bakhmut and Avdiivka area, they started to lose already 300 personnel. For 2024-2025, the average from 100, 150 to 200 personnel for each 1 square kilometers. It is a small gain for this amount. It is the attrition war, and probably the main objectives to use as deteriorated as possible efforts for Russian and not allow them to make more strategic breakthrough. But due to the inadequate conditions of our troops, ammunition, and other kind of stuff, specifically personnel, we are in some area liberating, in some area losing of Ukrainian territory.
And Mr. Ordonovich, in urban warfare contexts like this, what are the main risks for the defending army when troops withdraw from multiple positions?
Look at the most tight fight is going in the urban area. We can refer the battle around Bakhmut. We can refer the battle around the Avdiivka. It is also place when Russians are losing a lot of troops more than. Sorry for for interruption, because probably the lights is not good. I mean, energy cut off, not completely a blackmail, but still facing some challenges. It's mean
okay.
they can use this for sure, but again, the small gaining are very much costly to Russia, and we would stay as long as possible. We would resilient as better as possible in order to cut off the troops and military munitions, use a long-range strike to undermine the war machine and to defend our country and keep fighting until we will breathe.
Okay. From your experience, what are the likely next steps for Russian forces after establishing a foothold inside a city like this?
I believe the main efforts of Russian operation is still Pokrovsk and Mirnograd areas, because based on the strategic plan, they wanted to occupy it as soon as possible. As I mentioned previously, it was a plan to occupy Pokrovsk to the middle of October, but right now I believe they extended this plan probably to the end of February 2026. And for sure, the line of the conflict is very big, very lengthy, and they will use it one or another opportunity to make a breakthrough in other areas. It could be southern part, like close to Zaporizhia, and they do have numbers of objectives to achieve it. But in Zaporizhia, it was one of the good fortification built for Ukrainian troops. And in order to have more strong defensive line. Next, what they are going to do, I believe it is Kramatorsk and Slovyansk in Donetsk, in order to occupy more territory there. Ukrainians are going to do to defend in both in any direction. And again, as I mentioned, we would probably engage more long range for the undermining command post, cut off the logistics, as well as cut off the logistical supply to the war machine, which I have here. But everything will depend on the weather condition, or partially on the weather condition, as well as security assistance, what we are getting from our partners. It would be more better organized, logistically, coordinated well, and giving the appropriate tools for our military, it would be easy for us to be resilient and defend our country, because we do not have any other choice, only to defend. In other case, we are going to be subjugated once and probably for another 100 years.
Okay. Mr. Ordanovic, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been most insightful.
Have a peaceful evening. Good night.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll look at key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Uzbekistan and the United States have launched the American Uzbek Business and Investment Council to expand economic cooperation. The initiative, formalized by a presidential decree, follows President Shavkat Mirziyoyev's official visit to Washington earlier this month for a C5+1 summit.
The American Uzbek Business and Investment Council is designed to boost bilateral trade and attract investment across key industries, including energy, critical minerals, and textiles. The council will unite leading private companies from both nations and serve as a permanent platform for dialogue and project coordination. The decision comes after the president's visit to the United States for a C5+1 summit, during which a series of multi-million-dollar agreements were reached. Among them, a contract was signed for Uzbekistan to import 100,000 tons of US cotton and 2 million tons of soybeans over the next 3 years, as part of efforts to enhance local textile production and meet international quality standards. In the mining sector, the Ministry of Geology and Mineral Resources signed a strategic agreement with Denali Exploration Group, alongside a $1 billion memorandum with American firm Traxys for joint exploration and processing of critical minerals such as wolfram and molybdenum. From 1 January 2026, Uzbek residents will also be permitted to engage in investment operations in the United States without restrictions, a move expected to further strengthen private sector cooperation. Officials emphasize that the new council will create favorable conditions for business partnerships, helping drive Uzbekistan's industrial modernization and integration into global value chains. It is Sivil Rajapov reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Kazakhstan is launching a major investment project in its gold mining sector. Turkish company Mir Yıldız Mining is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a new processing plant in the Abai region. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina has more.
Turkish mining company Mir Yıldız Mining is investing $480 million in a gold processing plant in Kazakhstan's Abay region. The regional Hakim Berk said the company's subsidiary has already begun construction with production expected to start by the end of 2026. According to company head Emrah Erdem, Mir Yıldız Mining sees significant potential for gold mining in Kazakhstan. The company currently operates in 5 countries, extracting gold, copper, chromium and other metals. Its main market remains Turkey, where it produces around 1 million tons of copper ore each year. And amid growing investor interest in Kazakhstan's mineral resources, Vice Minister of Industry and Construction Iran Sharkan shared data on the state of geological exploration. And according to him, currently 103 types of minerals are registered with around 10,000 deposits across the country. Also, almost 3,000 licenses and 250 technology partnership contracts with investors are active. Meanwhile, experts estimate that Kazakhstan ranks among the top 10 countries in the world for untapped gold reserves, around 2,300 tons of gold valued at about $323 billion at current market prices. These numbers highlight Kazakhstan's growing importance in the global precious metals market, where rising reserves and active investments are strengthening its role in gold production. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev praised the close relations between their countries during a meeting at the Kremlin on Wednesday. According to the Kremlin, the leaders are discussing energy cooperation, including joint gas projects, as well as the impact of US sanctions on Russian oil companies. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Putin is also interested in hearing details of Tokayev's recent talks in Washington with US President Donald Trump and other Central Asian leaders. Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has condemned the recent explosions in Islamabad and Wana, Pakistan incidents that claimed multiple lives and left dozens injured. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
In a statement released by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Abdul Kahar Balkhi, Kabul expressed deep sorrow over the attacks. The ministry extended condolences to the victims' families and condemned the attacks. The blasts come amid growing tension between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Mohammad Asif posted on X saying, quote, "We are in a state of war." He warned that the suicide attack at Islamabad's district courts should serve as a wake-up call, insisting the conflict is not limited to border areas, but a war for all of Pakistan. In his post, the minister accused the Afghan authorities of failing to prevent cross-border terrorism, adding that bringing this war all the way to Islamabad is a message from Kabul. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's foreign ministry has also condemned Monday night's explosion in New Delhi, expressing sympathy to the people and the government of India and wishing the injured a swift recovery. Among its wider security concerns, Pakistan remains cautious about Afghanistan's growing engagement with India, a factor adding strain to already fragile relations. And while a shaky ceasefire continues between the two neighbours, tensions on both sides of the border remain high. For now, Islamabad and Kabul are calling for calm, but with mistrust deepening and violence creeping closer to major cities, regional peace appears as fragile as ever. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll discuss the latest talks held between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Central Asian nation leaders Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Stay with us.
and welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back to A News. Just days after US President Donald Trump hosted the leaders of 5 Central Asian countries in Washington for the C5+1 summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a diplomatic countermove, meeting Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev in Moscow and holding a separate phone call with Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. The Kremlin says both discussions focused on strengthening what it calls traditional partnership and strategic cooperation. The timing, though, highlights Moscow's growing concern over Central Asia's warming ties with Washington. Joining me now to unpack is Nurbolat Nishanbayev, PhD from Turan University from Almaty, Kazakhstan. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us.
Now, let's start with the timing here. Putin's outreach to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan came right after the C5+1 summit in Washington. What message is he sending?
Exactly. If we look at within the time frame, it may at one point looks pretty multivectoral aspects, because the first visit China, then United States, after this one to Russia. But we have to mention this meeting was planned 3 months ago, earlier, during the many press releases. The official Agorda released that in November, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev visit planned to Moscow. But anyhow, it us to what extent Kazakhstan is creating a new balance of power in Central Asia within the Russia on the one hand, on the other hand, United States. But this time, President's visit to Moscow highlights a few the new dimension. The first thing is, I would like President Tokayev in this time mention it only the state relations, but Central Asia, the Russian relations at one hand. On the other hand, before the state visit, President Tokayev gave an interview to the Russian newspaper. In interview, he met how the Russia's influence in Asia is important, and it's a win-win position to both sides. So therefore, I think for now, Russia needs more Central Asian countries than vice versa, because Central Asia becoming as a new hub between Asia and Europe, and they are strengthening ties with the Western allies. So therefore, this state visit highlights that Russian and Kazakhstan bilateral relations taking a new shape, new dimension.
And what else stood out to you about Putin's meeting with Tokayev? Was it substantive diplomacy or more some sort of symbolic reassurance?
I would like to highlight in this ongoing state visit an aspect. The first aspect, in this state visit, we see how Russian side prepared visit of the Tokayevs. Yesterday, Tokayev and Putin had over the 2 hours talks in private talks. So we see the various resources and various newspapers and released that Russia this time are very interested to keep the influence in the region, in particular in Kazakhstan. So therefore, I would like to mention that reactivization of the Western influence in Central Asia, in Kazakhstan, as well as the Chinese economic rise in our region, it made Russia to reactivate their foreign policy and to make stronger ties. If you remember, a few weeks ago, we had a summit, Central Asia plus Russia, in Tajikistan, in Dushanbe. In this summit, Putin mentioned that he is not satisfied with the trade volume with the Russia and the Central Asian countries. He wants to increase it. So therefore, we see that Russia is more than interested in the region, in particular in Kazakhstan, to expanding their trade relations with all the sphere, not limited in politics and cultural investment, but I think they are more interested on minerals and rare earth materials as well. So therefore, they are trying to compete with the other external powers in the Central Asia for the long term.
Okay, and could this new American involvement risk unsettling the long-established security and economic arrangements led by Moscow?
Exactly, that's the number one issue from my point of why Russia is wondering, why Russia is changing their policies toward Kazakhstan, and why they are more interested than ever before. Because, to be honest, in the last few years, we have seen the passive influence of the Western states in Central Asia and Kazakhstan, in particular after the withdrawal of the American troops from Afghanistan. But now, I have already mentioned it, we have seen very active involvement in American as well as European and the Chinese companies and all the other aspect new projects in Kazakhstan. So therefore, for Russia, is Kazakhstan always geopolitically considered as a buffer zones. So therefore, they would like to keep their active influence in all the spheres. So therefore, Western in Kazakhstan, I think it led toward Russia to reconsider, to reactivate their foreign policy toward our region, in short.
Dr. Nurbalat, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.